Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Empathy at the Table. I'm here with a very special guest. Her name is Sophia Holzer. Now, there's a backstory to the reason Sophia is here today. This is a live podcast. I normally, as you know, I normally do my podcast via online, via various platforms, but this is my first in-house podcast that we're doing here in the studio here in Barcelona. And I met Sophia quite recently at a workshop. And what really impressed me about Sophia was her absolute devotion to the world of emotional intelligence. And I really wanted to get a deep dive into Sophia's world and how her generation see emotional intelligence. So I'd like to welcome you, Sophia, to Empathy at the Table. Thank you for joining us. And this is a milestone for us because this is our first in-person podcast. Welcome, Sophia, to Empathy at the Table.
Thank you so much, Tony. I have to say it's also a milestone for me because I've never been on that side of the interview when it comes to podcasts. As I told you, I used to have one myself a while ago as a creative outlet, which is not active anymore. So it feels nice to be on this side. Thank you for bringing me on.
That's a real pleasure. I think we're going to have some fun today. And maybe just before we dive into some questions, for our listeners, maybe just if you dive off the diving board into the deep end and share with us a little bit about yourself and your trajectory into the world of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, let's dive into it. This is always a very loaded question, right? Like, where do we even start? But to give a little bit of a background where I'm from, I am Austrian and always grew up in Austria up until the age of about 19. This is where I decided to leave home and explore the world. I was growing up in a really small village. As I just told you earlier, we probably have 800, 900 people living in that small village, probably more cows than there are humans. So it was very, as the mindset often is in very small places, people aren't thinking very visionary, very big. And to me, it was very early on important to explore. And I had this drive to go away, and YouTube started to come when I was around 14, 13, something like this. I was really big into makeup, and I always watched American YouTubers. So at the age of like 18, 19, I knew, okay, I want to go to the States. And at that time, cultural care and becoming an au pair was a really big thing. So after high school, I became an au pair and packed all my stuff into a 23-kilo suitcase and moved to a place where I didn't know anybody, where it was a different culture. I mean, not completely different because it's still Western society somehow, right? But different culture, different language. I lived with a family, not my own, and I started taking care of kids that weren't my own while I was still a kid myself somehow. At the age of 19, I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as an adult already. And that was the first time that I noticed that my behavior has a direct impact on the kids I was also taking part in raising. And so I was, okay, it really matters what I say, what I do, and how I show up. So that's how I started to get into this. And I remember when I had moved to LA when I was 20, because I changed family, that's when people like Simon Sinek came into my life, and I started watching the first YouTube videos on motivation and how to connect with people. And as well as living in LA, people there live to express themselves, right? A lot of things are about arts, performing arts, being an actor, a model, a producer, and people are very expressive, something that I didn't know from small town to right outside of Vienna. And that was new. I was like, wow, this feels very refreshing. So I would say the US was definitely a tipping point for me, and like the first domino of like a very long domino line.
You probably represent a different dynamic to the people I normally have on the podcast.
It's good.
Which is great. And I think, that's what was really interesting about us meeting, because I think in our first conversation, you said it's interesting learning insights or hearing insights from someone who is not only a different generation, but a different race and a different gender as well. And we had some really interesting conversations. And one of the discussions we had was around leadership and how your generation, I won't say your age, but maybe you might want to share.
I don't care. I'm 28.
Okay, right.
I don't mind.
So I was very keen to see, how your generation view leadership, because I mean, let's face it, you guys are the future. Your generation is the future. Your generation is seeing things in different ways than, the old guard are seeing things. And I was really interested to hear your views and what you and your people of your generation think about leadership today.
Okay, so, I mean, I don't know if I can speak for my whole generation.
Yeah, no pressure, right?
Yeah,
you represent the whole of the generation.
But as for myself, that has vastly changed over time, I have to say. Because, again, drawing to my background, coming from a very performance-driven country, I would say, like Central Europe, it's a lot about where did you study, what did you study, where do you go work right after you're done studying, what does your CV say about you, and how fast do you grow into higher positions. So it's a lot about performance and delivering and doing. And so when you're in the early stages of your 20s, you don't know anything, right? I mean, some people much later still don't know anything, but you gain experience. So you just follow that. And that's what I followed as well. I thought that doing more and making, hard decisions really fast is what makes you a leader. Or people who have a lot of money, people who have really high positions, that's a leader. And all of that is tied to a title or, to a yardstick or a measurement that now I don't see it as that anymore. How much money you make, I don't think makes you a leader. What title you carry in a company, I don't think makes you a leader. Those are all external things. And for me, what has evolved over time is really the depth of a person and the characteristics they bring when they interact with other people and what impact they have on other people.
Yeah, I mean, I hear people say this. I believe this to the core of my being. We were having a coffee earlier on today, and you said that you tend to now get turned off by the corporate frameworks that exist, right? Trying to squeeze what it is that you believe to be true into a corporate framework. And you're more into the somatic stuff. And the discussion we had over coffee was, should it be either or, right? What happens to that liminal space in between? So I guess the question here is, when you think about these two opposite ends of the scale, are you optimistic for the future of leadership? Are you optimistic that we're moving the needle in the right direction, or do you still think there's a lot of work to be done?
Well, oh my God, there's a lot of work to be done. I don't want to get political here, but that's very frightening for my generation. Seeing what's going on and what type of people are in power is massively troubling and unsettling for me. I do have to say. And you cannot really ignore the political side of it, right? And I will name it. It's a lot of white men in power that are just deciding over generations and families and whole societies. And I think that's troublesome.
I mean, is this something that genuinely you guys think about?
I do.
Do you have when you bring up these kind of conversations with your friends? Do people roll their eyes and say, "Come on, let's just have a good time," or is this a genuine concern of people of your generation?
Both. Obviously depends on the setting, and I do have friends who I can discuss these things with, and I do have friends where it's not the best place to discuss it with, which is fine, right? Like each dynamic has their own characteristics and like what works in that friendship and what doesn't. And I myself tried not to drown too much into like, I'm too worried. I definitely am an optimist. I always think there's more good than there is bad. However, the bad is usually a lot louder, right? Like people drum a lot louder when they're usually insecure or trying to hide something, or they're usually a lot louder. Stupidity is a lot louder, I would dare to say.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it is a good point. So when you have these kind of conversations and you think about where, the world is going and the necessity for this idea of emotional intelligence, what's the kind of work that you've been doing on yourself, right? To understand the part that you play and what you can do?
That's also a very loaded question. What is the work that I have done on myself? Okay, wow. So first of all, I think once you dive into the world of personal development, the first thing to understand is that there's never a way back.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it ever really stops, right? You don't really overcome everything. You just meet certain things at a different phase in your life, maybe again, right? Or you let go of certain layers. So I think one really important thing is that doing that personal development journey is unbecoming. A lot of the things we have to let go again to then really understand what's underneath.
What does that actually mean? We hear this a lot, and for listeners who are maybe of your generation and they're thinking about, well, I really actually, it resonates with me, and I want to at least start doing the work. How can you unlearn something that you've learned? Tell me practically what steps that you've taken to do that. Exposure
to new experiences, new environments, new conversations, diversity in your group of friends. What I've noticed that has really, really given me a more holistic approach to any harder topic is having a diverse group of people around me. That has really insanely, that had an insane impact on me. So first, I had as I said earlier, the innate drive to explore something different when I was younger. And I think, fear gets in the way of a lot of things. But I always had, I would say, luckily, there was always some certain courage instilled in me that I would also be scared. It's not that I'm not. I would just like to do it anyways. And after a while, I understood that on the other side of fear is usually something that's really profound. So when I went abroad, you're faced with a lot of situations where you have to overcome certain fears, and also where you have to start trusting strangers because you would need help, right? So then there was this exposure to, you don't have to always doubt people. Strangers are humans as well. You can trust them. That's a beautiful experience. And so not only traveling abroad, but for me I was 22 or 21 when I also did, I studied business, international business management, and I had the opportunity to go abroad for an exchange semester. A lot of people chose not to because, again, it's something scary. You're usually in the age range between 19, 23. You don't know what's coming. Okay, so I chose to go to a very foreign culture, and I studied in Malaysia. What was I exposed to? Usually international exchange students that were also coming from parts of the world that aren't often traveling in Central Europe because of usually also financial stuff, right? Like if you're from America, Australia, or Europe, almost any place you go to is cheaper. If you're from a different place, or Asia or South America, it's usually really hard to go to Europe, America, or Australia. So then we befriended a lot of people from different cultures, with Muslim background, Pakistanis from Iran. That's something I wasn't exposed to too much. So I understood a lot more about Islam. And then afterwards, I went back to the States again, and I worked with entrepreneurs, people who were older than I am. So being exposed to a lot of different age groups, ethnicities, social class, educational level, and keeping that curiosity with the base of always finding a human behind, I think helped me to erase the boxes that we have in our brains to kind of make it easier for our head to define people. And that really, I have to say, is just diving into experience that will expose some of those beliefs. Or we talked about it earlier, like volunteering. I would volunteer, or, I would do a Vipassana. Experiences where people are like, oh my God, you did that? Traveling alone. Go travel alone.
So let's crack open this box of emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Because that's what really attracted me to want to talk to you is, I thought, what does a 28-year-old in this day and age? No, what does a 28-year-old? Because you teach it now. It's what you do. It's on your LinkedIn profile. It's emotional intelligence and mental fitness, right? This is what you teach. And so I was thinking, what does a 28-year-old package and put out there in the world for to help people understand emotional intelligence? So maybe let's backtrack, and if you share with me what does it actually mean to you, emotional intelligence, and then maybe share with how do you then actually put that stuff out into the world? What outcomes do you shape?
Yes. So what is emotional intelligence for me? Emotional intelligence, I think, is an umbrella term that is composed by a lot of different skills. And I think emotional intelligence is the understanding of your own emotions, how to regulate them, and how they relate to others in order to form better and more meaningful connections. And I do think it's essential for our lives. And I'm sure that the longest Harvard study there is out there on happiness, and it tells us that the quality of our relationships actually define the quality of our lives. And if you're going into a room and ask people who wants to have a happy and meaningful life, I don't think there's anybody who would leave their hands on their laps. And I mean, that relates to myself as well. So emotional intelligence is that skill set to understand yourself, to regulate yourself, and also then relate to others better and build those connections, those relationships that will enhance the quality of your life. So that is emotional intelligence for me. Okay.
And so, this idea, I mean, obviously Daniel Goleman was the godfather of this idea. Emotional intelligence existed before.
I was about to say.
But I think he made it really kind of popular with his book, right? He made it popular
with his book. Yes.
And then people suddenly started looking at and realizing, well, maybe IQ is a good indication of your competence, but EQ is a better indication of your success.
Whether you last
in general. Exactly right. You can be competent, but you don't make it through, right? But with emotional intelligence, as you said, the ability to understand your own feelings, your self-awareness, and your ability to then control that or manage those emotions effectively, I think is really important. I see you as literally in that juxtaposition, right? Because you've got the older generation, the old codgers like me, the boomers, and then you've got the younger generation coming up, and so you're kind of in the middle, and it's a wonderful position to be in because you can influence both sides, right? You and I are having a talk, but you would just as well appeal to my kids, right? Who would think, oh yeah, she's in touch with what's going on. So do you feel that as a responsibility in the work that you do?
Very much so. I would actually refer myself a couple of times in conversations to being part of like a bridge generation.
Yeah.
Because I'm like at the end of the millennial generation, I would say.
Yeah.
And not really Gen Z.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my parents are the boomer generation. So it's definitely a bridge between the three, I would even say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can relate a lot to the digital age and growing up with it, even though I didn't fully grow up with it. So phones and the internet was introduced when I was around 14, a little bit younger, but we were like the last household in our city to actually have internet and phones. But I also understand how it's like to grow up not having the phone and just checking where the bikes are in front of the doors to know where your friends are.
Yeah. Wow.
So
nice.
I think it's a blessing.
Yeah.
It's definitely a blessing. But yes, you're right. I'm definitely in the middle. And it helps, but it's also conflicting sometimes for myself.
Conflicting? Expand on that. What do you mean by that?
Because I can get where boomer generations have not been having access to that realm of going to therapy. And, it's something that is what's wrong with you. But then there's the other aspect. I mean, I guess you can probably, speak on that more. But then now there's a lot of different challenges placed upon the new generation that has somehow been manufactured and created by the previous generations.
Wow.
And they're being told they're fragile. I'm referring to, for example, the social media issue, right? Like, the younger generation has been brought into this madness, but we're not skilled with handling all this information that's bombarding us. So now the older generation seems, or I've heard it many times, like, oh my goodness, the younger generation is so fragile.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm here in the middle. I can understand why people have less or a smaller skill set for dealing with all that information bombarding. But I can also understand why boomers would say, oh my God, you're fragile.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a really good insight. So what I'm hearing you say is I'm living in a house that you guys built. And now you guys are complaining that this doesn't work, and you sound like a bunch of whingers. But actually, I'm living in a house that you built, and you're forcing me to live in there. And so that I think that does create a deeper level of responsibility for you, because you're in the middle, to be able to almost be like a translator, right? Between the two, because you are right. I mean, there's a big narrative that the younger generation are seen as maybe always complaining, a bit weak. They haven't really had to suffer, and they get things easy. There is that narrative. And then there's the opposing narrative that the older generation, they just don't understand. And actually all the crap that we're dealing with is a result of the largesse and the excess that you guys created. How do we fix that?
Dialogue. I think a lot more dialogue, like the one that we are having right now.
Yeah.
It's a slow process. It's nothing that's fixable instantly. I think it happens over time, but definitely more dialogue. And that is where emotional intelligence comes into play. Yeah. What type of conversations are we having? What type of questions are we asking? Do they really give us the answers that would help us move the needle? How courageous are we in our approach to bridge generations, and how can we actually learn from each other? How do we connect to each other? How do we relate? How do we create community that is diverse? Again, what minds come into play? What type of people come into play when we sit at a round table and have conversations? I've just recently also talked to somebody at the cover where we had this dialogue, and I mentioned so many times the younger generations are or people talk about the younger generations that we need the young voices. Okay, but where's the seat at the table?
Wow, yeah, yeah.
Where am I in the conversation? We are talked about. Where are we in the conversation?
Yeah, we talked about this as well earlier on when you asked me about one of the biggest challenges when we talked about dysfunctional teams. And I said to you, one of the biggest challenges I see is the lack of psychological safety, right? The lack of ability to have those conversations, right? And talk about these kind of things. In your work, are you kind of able to provide frameworks for these kind of conversations? Do you think that's possible, or do you think it's maybe people should figure it out for themselves?
What do you mean when it comes to psychological safety?
Yeah, so with emotional intelligence, with that as your backdrop, is there, in the work that you do, is there do you provide frameworks for people to have those difficult conversations? Because they are difficult. Let's not beat around the bush. I mean, when somebody comes into work and their personal life is affecting how they actually show up at work, but they're taught that leave your personal stuff at home. Well, okay, but there's a conversation that needs to be had about how it's affecting me, and I can't ignore that. How does the work that you do help provide that space for these kind of conversations?
Yes. So to look at a person more holistically and not just see them as the role they have in a company for the company.
Yeah.
I think it's to really see a human as a human.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that it comes really down to that, because I think that's also what the biggest difference is to previous generations. It didn't really matter. Okay, I say this really harsh now, and it might not be true, but it didn't really matter who you are in all your aspects.
Yeah.
It mattered what you do and how you perform your job, right?
Yeah.
And because it wasn't really a bigger thing, that's also what people just did, right?
Yeah.
We just function, and all the rest was shoved down and dealt somewhere else, and it shows up. You know, I mean, there's so many stress-related diseases, and I mean anything that we can kind of backtrack to, emotional suppression and mental diseases. But I think what's really important is to see humans as a more holistic approach and multifaceted. And when you understand that how a person feels or how they show up at home, what's going on, it doesn't have to be, down to the nitty gritty, right? But that does affect how you show up. The way you think, the way you connect, the way you feel is how you show up. And there is a difference between, which is, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but between men and women, there's a big difference, which I do think is really important to understand. But I read a quote just 2 days ago, very simple, but it landed. And it was, when men do good, they feel good. And for women, it is the other way around. When women feel good, they do good. For myself, I can relate. If I first need to make sure that I feel really good, and then I do good. And I mean, in this case, I can pose the question to you, right? Would you say that it's true for men? It's first, like, if you do good, then you feel good?
Well, as you said, I can't speak for all men. But yeah, I definitely I can relate to that. Like, if I feel crap, I'll go to the gym. And then after the gym, I'll feel better, and then I'll come home, and then I'll be able to do better. So, yeah, it's definitely, I feel it's part of my psyche that I need to do something in order to get myself into a better space to be able to deliver. Yeah, I guess that. Yeah. But I'm not speaking for all men. I'm just speaking for myself.
Of course.
There's something you said as well earlier on about this idea about. When we look at the way as we're facing, for example, in the corporate world, and this idea that you have of I don't want to be, in a corporate framework or the chains of corporate company. What does that actually mean? One of my a colleague I spoke to works at a very large multinational, 35,000 staff, and this person is the head of HR. And I remember her saying that when she would interview people of your age, the questions they would ask wouldn't necessarily be about the company the strategy of the company. The questions were more about, the value, the culture of the company, what policies they had in place for sustainability, for mental health and things like this. And she was genuinely surprised at how important these things were to this generation. Do you have any comments? Does that ring a bell, resonate with you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think that is one of the biggest shifts that you can probably observe between the generations, that shift in values. Because I think starting with mine, the importance of well-being, the importance of belonging has been substantial.
Wow.
And I can speak for myself when it comes to that as well. The larger a operation is, a company is, the less connected you are with the people you work with. I mean, if we compare it to like a big city and a village, where do you find more community? Usually the village, right?
Yeah.
Because you feel so anonymous in a huge city. You don't really know anybody. You walk past each other and you don't really have to smile, and it's okay because you will never see this person again. As in where in a village, you have a community. You know what's going on with the sister of this person, and you remember the dad's name of this person. And what does it give you? A sense of belonging. It also gives you the feeling that, okay, if you fuck up, excuse my French, somebody's got your back.
Yeah.
And what does that do? Make you feel good, make you feel safe. Going back to the psychological safety, right? Connecting with people. And that, in turn, helps a company thrive, I believe. So when it comes to the icky part of just the corporate that you mentioned, for me, it's just also like the size, and it goes down to the culture, right?
Yeah.
So yes, the shift in the values has been huge. Also because my generation is going to be the generation that's going to bear the results of like climate change and all these bigger things. I as I said earlier, it's worrying. It's worrying that climate and society is taking a turn that a certain generation is not going to witness anymore, probably. And if you don't see something, or you're not going to be there for certain outcomes, it probably worries you a lot less than my generation. And I think corporations are a big part of that, and it's a social responsibility. And so that is a huge factor for the coming workforce. And so I'm not surprised that this is at the forefront of questions of how it is, integratable with how you live and how you have your own values straight.
Do you see yourself as a leader?
Yes, because I think everybody is in one way or the other, because we are leading ourselves too, right? We don't necessarily have to lead a whole team or other people, but every day you are the one deciding when you get out of bed and what you do. And we all have a certain role to play, whether we have a family or not. We're a friend, we're a daughter, we're a sister. To some, we are mentors, we're a mentee. There is a role, and we're leading that.
It's a mindset. What I mean, you say it's a mindset rather than so as you're being rather than doing. So yeah. Okay. Well, we are coming to the end of this conversation, unfortunately. Well, unfortunately for the listeners, because you and I are going to carry on for many more years to come. But I do have one last question for you, and it's, what does the world look like to you with the work that you do in it?
More connected, unified, and healthier.
More connected, unified, and healthier. And how will you know that's happening? What outward signs would we be seeing to know that these things are actually taking place?
I'm visionary right now.
Yeah.
Rates of mental health issues and diseases decreasing. That's in a grand scheme of things. But I also think, or would hope, that more impact-driven companies are more on the rise. that individuality is more celebrated collectively. What I do see and what I like is that a lot more communities are being built. It's that communal factor. Connection. It goes down to that. Like when I'm on the vision board, or also what's written on my website, what my mission is, it's connecting people, creating experiences, and increasing well-being.
Yeah.
So that's with my little impact, I try to do that.
Well, I mean, you say little impact, but
my little footprint in the world.
Big changes come from a few people getting together and making those decisions and those differences. Sophia, it's been a real pleasure. Maybe just to finish off with, for people who listen to this podcast and they think, wow, what a visionary that person is. What an incredible insight she shares. How can our listeners find you? And what's exciting you at the moment? What projects are you involved that are really exciting you?
Yes. So funny thing, we joked about this and I'm going to mention it. I'm definitely on LinkedIn, but not very active. But no, feel like if anybody's interested, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I am, classic for my generation. I'm also on Instagram and you'll find me under Sophia Mentally Fit. And the projects I'm working on right now, it's actually very exciting. I have been very much interested in the female and male dynamics, but also have been diving more into also our cycles and how that actually affects how we show up, and that there's a huge gap in knowledge between men and women when it comes to our cycles. So that relates a lot to obviously our awareness as well. So I'm diving a little bit more into that, and let's see. There's a couple of cool projects coming up for sure.
Will you come back and share them with us in the future?
Yes, if you invite me again, I'll do that here too.
Thank you. Well, Sophia, thank you very much for being my very first in-person guest.
Yeah, thank you for trusting me with it as well.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Sophia Holzer.